So, Ruth, the problem that we're going to talk about today, you might find that patients present with this issue when it comes to work, when it comes to study, when it comes to eating, weight or shape or appearance, even when it comes to sports or just trying things that are new or different, and in some ways result in avoidance or procrastination. So, today we're talking about the idea of perfectionism. I'm Rita Younan.
And I'm Ruth Holt. We're both advanced level schema therapists, supervisor trainers, and we're starting a new series, 7 Minute Schemas Ask Us, where we answer common questions that therapists have. And you can add your own schema therapy therapist questions in the comments below. And if we can give you some ideas in 7 minutes, we will absolutely do so.
So maybe we'll start off with the definition of perfectionism. So perfectionism involves a relentless pursuit of personally demanding standards and basing one's self-worth on this pursuit, which results in huge cost to one's well-being. And the way in which we distinguish that from high standards is essentially the impact on the individual. And that's how that people usually present in therapy, that this perfectionism is really exhausting them and driving them to the ground almost.
Yeah, and it's very similar, isn't it? That you can hear the unrelenting standard schema even within that definition, can't you? That there's always an unrelenting standard schema going on for perfectionists. Typically, that's held in their demanding critic mode, that part of them that they learnt potentially through their parents, through their culture, through peers, that says your value is connected to your perfectionism or your performance. And if you're not always performing at that level, you may lose out on a sense of self or a sense of worth or affirmation. So it's often a big historical element to this. And so we need to be exploring that with clients about where did they learn these rules? Where was it modeled? Some clients can access that really easily. Some can't. They're so embedded in their culture, in their family of origin, that they don't see that as a particular lesson that they learned growing up.
And that's part of the work, really, kind of trying to explore some of these rules. And when they've broken a rule, what happens, what's activated for them when they break one of those rules. And I guess one of the things that pointing out a rule versus a healthy standard is the really black or white nature of these rules that are driven by the demanding critic mode.
Yeah. And then, of course, when you're exploring what happens when they break those rules, when they don't perform, you're experiencing, and helping them to experience what that vulnerable side of them feels in that moment. And that's a really important issue we want to be helping our clients with, is understanding, when I don't perform, what does that mean for me? Does it mean I'm a failure? Does it mean I'm defective? Does it mean I'll be abandoned? Because often this perfectionism is a coping style to respond to not wanting to feel those core emotional schemas that vulnerable side of them might experience.
And what I've found, Ruth, too, is a lot of my patients who have had perfectionism, particularly with regards to school performance or study and those kinds of things, is that the perfectionism is so exhausting that eventually, even though it's rewarded, this is part of the problem, perfectionism is rewarded, that they might get a really good mark, a distinction or HD, or actually distinction is not good enough, it should be a HD, shouldn't it? And what they find is they can't actually celebrate the success in getting that type of mark, because it came with such distress to get there.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a distress that often perfectionists don't want to admit to, because there's often a sense of being a perfect person, or being a person who I want to be. I shouldn't feel those feelings. So there's a lot of shame that's connected to that distress. And so it can be really helpful to mode out the flips that happen for people when they're experiencing that unrelenting standard schema. And so, what is it the vulnerable child's feeling? What are the coping modes? Now, we will almost always again see a perfectionistic over controller in this kind of presentation, a side of them that says you'll be okay if. We just got to keep doing, we've got to keep ordering, sorting, the sort of more OCD presentation. or a really hypervigilant, anxious kind of coping state. And that, of course, is unsustainable. So often then people will also flip into an avoidant mode. So a detached protector or a detached self-soother, or even like an undisciplined child mode. You can often see people who've really striven and tried, and then they just cannot be bothered and they'll become quite impulsive or undisciplined. And so they'll flip between this sort of overwork, underwork kind of pendulum.
Yeah, or they just avoid altogether, don't they? Until it gets to the point where they have to submit the assignment or whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's right. And this is one of the challenges, I think, when you're working with clients who are perfectionistic, because we bring our own stuff to the therapy, don't we? So I know for me, sometimes when I'm working with clients who are perfectionistic, I can feel criticized. I can feel like they're judging me and my therapy, that I'm sitting an exam for them. And if I'm not in a good place, I can then get defensive or overcompensate myself and start overloading them with homework and wanting to achieve a lot in the session, in which case we're just colluding with each other.
Yeah, and I guess for me, the transference is more around really just not understanding it, not being someone who's perfectionistic myself. The unrelenting standard schema, yes, I have, but it manifests itself differently. And so, in some ways, it's kind of like trying to understand what the perfectionism actually looks like for the particular individual and being really curious about. So, let me just really understand how you go about things. How did you go to start the task? Because I think really attuning and just kind of understanding the internal world of the individual is really going to help you understand the perfectionism and how to work with it.
And that's where that's such a key part of limited reparenting, isn't it? That we want to attune to that little child who was not feeling okay, not feeling loved, not feeling good enough. And that in itself is a powerful experience for these clients.
Mhm,
Well,
mhm.
that's our 7 minutes, Rita. If you've got particular questions you would like us to answer, put them in the comment section below. And you can also look at further developing your schema therapy skills. We have online courses that you can do at your own pace. We have online training that's live, and even hopefully some face-to-face training coming your way. So look at the links below to go to the Schema Therapy Institute of Australia website and see what other options there are, but also leave your comments.